G'day everyone, welcome to Andy 101. Today we've got the former Prime Minister of Australia, the Honourable Tony Abbott AC. Welcome Tony.
Andy, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. Tony, what motivated you to a lifetime in politics?
It's a big question and it deserves a concise answer. I guess growing up as a youngster, I was lucky enough to be educated by the Jesuits, and in those days, the motto that every attendee at a Jesuit school got was to be a man for others, a person for others. And I took that Jesuit motto very seriously, and I figured that when I left school, my job wasn't just to get rich and to be successful, it was to try to make a difference to others. And that took me first into journalism and ultimately into politics.
In 1981, you were a Rhodes Scholar. Do you remember those days studying abroad?
I do, with great affection. I can remember the first day I rocked up at the Queen's College, Oxford. My delusions of grandeur lasted about an hour, and my delusions of adequacy lasted about a day. But nevertheless, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, educationally magnificent. Socially rich and rewarding. I made some fabulous friends, many of whom I keep to this day. There is one thing to be said about Oxford, and I'm quoting now an American Rhodes Scholar. He said, "An Oxford education leaves you, quote, magnificently unprepared for the long littleness of life." And I suppose one way or another, I've been trying to inject a bit of something into life ever since.
Do you think there's any advice that you'd give to our future superstars trying to aim for that Rhodes Scholar?
Well, I don't like the term superstar because in the end we're all ordinary people, hopefully trying to do extraordinary things. But look, the advice I'd give to anyone is try to be your best self. Try to make the most of your circumstances. I'm trying to think, was it Teddy Roosevelt who said, be the best you can with what you have where you are?
That's right, Tony. Thank you for your contribution there. How important do you think the local Chinese Australian community is for the Liberal Party of Australia and our government?
Any political party that wants to succeed has got to be representative of the broad community. There's now well over 1 million Australians of Chinese background, and they need to be taken extremely seriously and well represented inside the Liberal Party. I'm proud of the fact that Helen Sham Ho, a Liberal, was the first Chinese-born member of an Australian Parliament. I'm proud of the fact that Senator Bin Chen was the first, another Liberal from Victoria, was the first Chinese-born member of the Federal Parliament. Bill O'Chee was one of my colleagues, an Australian with the Chinese heritage. We often forget just how long people of Chinese heritage have been in Australia. Senator Thomas Backup in the Federation Parliaments was of Chinese heritage. Trooper Yin Gan was one of the first Anzacs ashore at Gallipoli. So there have been people of Chinese heritage who have been wonderful Australians for the best part of 2 centuries, and we've got to make sure that no one who is a fair dinkum Aussie ever feels like a stranger in his or her own country. And there are, well, literally well over 1 million fair dinkum Aussies who are of Chinese background.
Tony, moving forward, what do you think of Malcolm Turnbull?
Well, Malcolm Turnbull is a fellow member of the former Prime Minister's Club, and it's important that we club members think and speak well of each other.
Tony, has your relationship with Turnbull changed since the leadership spill?
Look, I guess it's that's a pretty dramatic thing to happen, but again, I understand that the leadership of the party is the gift of the party room, just as I understand that the prime ministership is the gift of the people. So he did what he did, and it was what it was, and I just have to accept that.
Tony, in 2013, your government inherited a teetering economy from the Labor government. You implemented landmark trade agreements in place, only to lose that credit to your successor, Turnbull. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not sure that I did. The Abbott government, with Andrew Robb as Trade Minister, did a very, very good job finalising trade deals that had been languishing for a decade with China, with Japan, with South Korea. And I think we did get considerable credit for those deals. Now, the Turnbull government, to its credit, kept alive the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations, which could easily have died once Donald Trump became the president, but the wonderful Shinzo Abe, together with the Turnbull government, kept all of that going and brought it to fruition. So I think that Malcolm has considerable trade kudos to his credit as well, but I guess no one can take away from the Abbott government the fact that we got the 3 big deals done.
That's right, Tony. Back in the day, I remember you making headlines for buying a second-hand fridge off Gumtree. Do you still have that fridge?
We do. It's in the Abbott garage. It's the house beer fridge. Margie likes to keep part of it free for the overflow from the main fridge upstairs, but yeah, the fridge is still there, it's still working, it makes a bit of noise, so I'm pleased it's in the garage rather than in the house.
So it was a good fridge.
It was a perfectly good fridge and it's done us proud.
Tony, you always volunteer for the Rural Fire Service. What drives your passion for volunteering there?
I have loved every minute that I've spent with the Davidson Rural Fire Brigade. Yes, there have been some scary moments, particularly during the 1920 bushfire season when I think I spent about 60 days on the back of a fire truck. But a wonderful group of people who really do want to put themselves on the line to serve, whether it's bushfire fighting, the occasional bit of structure firefighting, whether it's flood recovery work, whether it's storm damage, the Davidson Brigade, along with the other brigades of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, is always there to help.
That's awesome, Tony. Now, this next question. During your Prime Ministership back in the day, 2 young Australians, Myuran and Andrew, were executed in Indonesia for drug charges. And in my understanding, they are Reformed Christians. How do you reflect on those difficult times?
Well, look, I absolutely accept that other countries have different systems of justice to us, but I have no reason to think that the Indonesian justice system didn't work fairly and appropriately in these particular cases. We in Australia don't have the death penalty. Countries such as Indonesia do. And I guess the fate of those 2 young Australians is a lesson. Don't break the law, particularly don't break the law in countries that have very harsh penalties for particular offences. So obviously, as a parent and as a human being, I feel for the families of those 2 young men, but you do the wrong thing and it has some consequences, but the fact that they seem to have seen the error of their ways while in prison, hopefully is to their everlasting credit.
Tony, recently we've observed the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. How do you recall those moments of her and her contributions to our Commonwealth nations?
What a remarkable monarch, what a magnificent human being, and what a splendid life of duty and service from the beginning to the end she lived. So I think firstly of the woman who was wholly admirable, and secondly of the institution, which I think has really demonstrated its great strengths over the last couple of months. It's a cliche that you only know what you've got when it's gone. Well, the Queen has gone, sure, but the crown is still with us.
Correct.
And what I think we've remembered in this period of the Queen's passing and the King's accession is that the monarchy gives us things that we wouldn't have under any conceivable republic. It gives us continuity. No elected or even appointed president is going to have the tenure in office that Her Majesty the Queen had, or even that King Charles will have. No political president is going to have the humility and the understatement and frankly the depth that Her Majesty the Queen had. And while King Charles won't reign for as long as his mother, there's no reason why he won't have 15 or 20 years on the throne, which is an extraordinary length of time. But in any event, we've known Prince Charles as part of our public life at least since the mid-1960s when he came to Australia to spend 6 months or so as a kind of a junior housemaster at Timbertop in Victoria. So the other thing is that I'm not saying that everyone turns out as well as the best, but members of the royal family are, in a sense, bred and trained from birth to lives of duty and service, to appreciating that their job is not to grandstand, their job is not to direct, their job is to serve, and I suppose in Badgett's words, the right to be consulted, to encourage and to warn. And I'm sure that in this respect, King Charles will turn out to be very much his mother's son.
Tony, you are a father to 3 lovely daughters. What's it like to be a dad?
Well, it's a wonderful privilege, and it's a responsibility which I dare say I haven't always discharged as well as I should. Part of being in public life is that you're out a lot more than the average person
of course.
is. You've got to spend a lot of nights away from home, and I think Margie, my wife, and my 3 girls, Louise, Frances and Bridget, have had to make do with someone who had a lot of other things on his mind, and I'm very lucky that they've borne up with that, and certainly I'm very lucky that Margie has been a wonderfully supportive spouse throughout my public life. So look, I think the greatest thing for anyone is to be a parent. We are obliged to be the best parent we can be. All of us, I suppose, have some limitations, and sometimes they're the limitations of character, sometimes they're the limitations of circumstance. In my case, probably a bit of both.
That's tremendous, Tony. Now, to wrap up today, what are your views on the upcoming state election?
Obviously, as a Liberal, I very much want the Perrottet government to succeed. It's never easy to win a 4th term, and the best way to win a 4th term is to have a very clear agenda, to be able to say clearly to the electorate, if you re-elect a government, this is how the state will be different and better. And I'm very much looking forward to to Dom's fourth term agenda. He is a wonderful human being, and I think he's doing a good job under difficult circumstances. And as I said, I'm looking forward to what he has to say to us between now and March of next year.
Thank you, Tony, for today. Thank you for your contribution.
Good on you, Andy. Thank you.